Okay, it's 9 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and begin. Haven't heard the bell, but we will go ahead and begin. It's good to be with you. It's good to look out and see nice spring colors everyone's dressed like, and it's good to be here this morning. We are as we are continuing our study in the Exodus and the wandering of the wilderness. Just want to remind us as we go the purpose of this. Our purpose is to understand the Bible story more, and so that we have a better understanding of it and can better put together all of these stories that can kind of seem random and put them together as everything is pointing towards Christ in the New Testament. And that is what our purpose is and what we are trying to do here today. So, last Sunday, we left at Kadesh Barnea. That's where we ended very quickly, and I apologize for that. Hopefully I won't do it again where I'm having to fly through at the very end. But that's where we left off, and the 10 spies had put a bad report out, right? And so because of that, the children of Israel say, no, we cannot enter into the land of Canaan. And so Moses and Aaron and Joshua and Caleb plead with the people. Of course, they will not listen to them, and they are to wander around for the next 40 years. Do you remember the significance of the 40 years? Why 40? 1
year for each day the spies.
Yes. One year for each of the days that the spies had gone out into the land. So that's where we left off. And I'll say this about so we are in the wandering in the wilderness. And I'll say this, that we are given a lot of detail about the Exodus. And I mean, we've talked about 2/3 of our class has been really the Exodus and being at Mount Sinai. Now, as we continue forward, we really only hit the highlights of what happens in this next period. It's a definite, distinct period, but we're really not told all the stories that happen. I mean, today alone, we are going to really be in all 40 years of the 39 years that they are wandering around. And, I thought about this. I think I say sometimes wandering in the wilderness, like I wonder what's over there. I wonder what's across the mountain range, right? And that's not what they're doing. They're not, let's just wander around over there. It's wandering, which I don't know if you can tell my difference in those two words or not. But wandering is W-A-N-D-R, as in they are wandering aimlessly around waiting for that generation to die. That's what the purpose of this whole thing is that they are, as the Wilderness books say, for the next 38 years, they will merely wait for a generation to die. During these years, they live as shepherds in a dry land, and that's part of their punishment. During the last year of the 40 years, they begin to travel as the Lord leads them around the Dead Sea and enter from a different side. And so I think originally they were going to go through Kadesh Barnea and go up north, but of course we know that they're going to go around the Jordan River and enter by Jericho, kind of in the middle part of the land of Canaan. So that's where we are as we start today, and we have a lot to cover. And so we're in Numbers 15. Just want to briefly start off and say, as we jump in the material that we have today, is we have these instructions for being holy and having, if there was some unintentional sins, and what they need to do to repair that and to offer sacrifices to make atonement for unintentional sins, whether it be individual or congregational. We also have the story of a Sabbath breaker that is going to be stoned to death. Look over in chapter 15, verse 32. It says, "Now while the sons of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering wood on the Sabbath. Those who found him gathering wood brought him to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation. And they put him in custody because it had not been declared what should be done to him." I really think what they're saying here is, I think it's clear that they did not know exactly what to do with him. But if you look over in Exodus chapter 31, and it mentions part of the law that in Exodus 31, at the very end of verse 15, it says, whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall surely be put to death. So I think that they did know that they need to be put to death. Maybe it was they didn't know, well, how do we put them to death? Do we stone them, at a bow and arrow? Whatever the case may be. And I think that's what they're questioning, right? And I just happen to wonder, too, is it because they thought, man, he's just picking up wood, just to make a fire on the Sabbath day? And obviously it doesn't say that, but I just can't help but wonder if that is maybe why they kind of hesitate and say, well, they could have taken action. They know that they're going to have to put him to death. That's what the law says. But, man, it just sticks. But what's God say about it? He declares that in verse 35 that he shall surely be put to death and that they're going to stone him. And so that's what they do in accordance to God's will. The last part of chapter 15, we have that these tassels are to be sewn on their garments as a reminder to help them keep God's commandments, right? We're not really going to look into that much, but just mention it. We kind of do that today, I think, a lot of times. I'm sure there's somebody in here that has a wristband on that has something, years ago it was Live Strong. Everyone had the yellow bands on. But you see that all the time. People will have maybe a religious, a Bible verse on there, on these rubber bands. What's the same concept? That the purpose is the same. They had these tassels on, and then when they look at that tassel, it was supposed to remind them to be holy and to follow God's commandments. Well, that's the exact same thing that we do sometimes with those type bands. So let's continue on. We're going to slow down here at the rebellion of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. I'll say that a lot of these stories in this time period, I think, are kind of lost. That, especially the ones that we are looking at today, we think about, we know what happens with Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. We don't remember all the details with it. And I could say that about all of these that we're going to look at today, that we just kind of forget these stories. Unlike other periods of the Bible that are much more well known, we kind of almost forget these. So in chapter 16, verse 1, it says, Now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, with Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took action. Okay? So they are going to get everyone stirred up. And they are going to get 250 leaders of Israel involved in this. And they are going to rebel against Moses and Aaron. Look in verse 3. It says, They assembled together against Moses and Aaron, and they said to them, You have gone far enough, for all that you, the congregation, are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is in their midst. So why do you exalt yourself above the assembly of the Lord? And so then Moses falls on his face, I think, in prayer to this. One thing that I notice here, looking in verse 1, it talks about On. You don't ever hear about him. He's mentioned that one verse. And I think that there might be two reasons why, or one of two reasons, let's say, in thinking about this. It could be, and it's probably most likely, that he just becomes so insignificant in the story that it's no point in bringing him back up. It could also be, and maybe I hope more for this, is that maybe he came to his senses and said, I don't think we should be doing this. And he backed off. I don't know. It's not told in Scripture, but we do know that he's not ever mentioned again in this story. So it's Korah, Dathan, and Abiram that are really the instigators of this. And so Moses is going to tell them in the next couple of verses that, okay, we are going to kind of have a showdown. And we're going to find out who is going to be holy towards the Lord. And look in verse 7. This is part of Moses' response. He says, put fire in them. He's talking about these censers that they're going to have. Put fire in them and lay incense upon them in the presence of the Lord tomorrow. and the man whom the Lord chooses shall be the one who is holy. You have gone far enough, you sons of Levi." Moses throws it right back in his face. So Korah says, "You've gone far enough, Moses." And what's Moses say? "You've gone far enough, you sons of Levi," talking to Korah there in this. If you look further on, you will notice that in verse 12, that Dathan and Abiram at some point had gone back to their tents. And this time, Moses calls them to come out into his presence. So they go get him, basically. Go get them. And we have in verses 12 through 14, I'll just read it. It says that Moses sent a summons to Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Elab. And they said, "We will not come up. Is it not enough that you have brought us up out of the land, flowing with milk and honey, to have us die in the wilderness? But you would also lord it over us. Indeed, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor have you given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Would you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up." Did you notice what they said in verse 13? He says, "You have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey." And slavery. They're talking about Egypt. They're saying, we were in a land flowing with milk and honey, and you've led us into the wilderness. You haven't brought us into the promised land. We're not going to obey you. I find that so insulting and kind of ironic that they would even mention, would say that. And so, again, Moses will say in verse 15, he will talk to God and say, don't listen to their sacrifices. Disregard anything, any of their offerings. And I think with him saying that to God, I think you kind of see again how close him and God were, that he would be able to say, hey, don't listen to their offerings, which of course God knows their hearts anyway. And so we have this showdown that's going to happen. We're told that they are going to have 250 of these censer pans. And these, I think, are these type of pans are, they're more like the ones that we would have for the contribution, the kind of a pan like that, with maybe some chains on it, and so you can hold it and burn incense in it. Unlike what you see, if you see a video maybe of the Catholic Church, when they're swinging that huge incense thing around, whatever it is. But probably more like the pans that we use, and would have incense and fire in that. And so they have 250 of them, and it's kind of be a showdown between Korah, Dathan and Abiram, and there's 250 leaders, and Moses and Aaron. And so if you look in verse 19, it says that Korah is the one that assembles the congregation. I guess he gets his one moment of power in, that he is the one that assembles the congregation. And so, again, in verse 20, we have that God is ready to wipe everyone out. We've seen this over and over and over again. He's ready to just destroy them and start new. And Moses and Aaron intercede and basically say, let's not have one man that is the problem, cause this entire assembly to be destroyed. So, as we go on, we have that he tells Moses and Aaron to get everyone away from the camps of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And I was thinking about that. Well, that's such an odd group of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Why would they might be connected? If you look remember that Korah is from the tribe of Levi and is part of the Kohathites, living here on the south part of the tabernacle. Well, look who's living on the south side as well, the sons of Reuben. Dathan and Abiram are from Reuben. So that might be the reason why these guys kind of got together and kind of boiled up on one another and had this revolt. That might be why, because they're living close by, living to one another. But as we continue, verse 26, he says, and this is Moses, he spoke to the congregation, saying, "Depart from the tents of these wicked men, Touch nothing that belongs to them, or you will be swept away in all their sins. So he tells everyone, he says, all right, everybody, everyone get back. You know something big is about to happen when you're told, everyone get back from this. Everyone stand back. Kind of like, you ever been 4th of July or something, shooting fireworks, and someone says, all right, y'all stand back, right? That's kind of the concept that's happening here, is Moses saying, everyone stand back. And so they do. And you know what's about to happen. It says in verse 27 that all of their families, it mentions all of the families of Dathan and Abiram. It does not quite mention all of the family of Korah. And why I say that also is I don't think that all of the children of Korah went along with this. My reasoning in that is that in Numbers 26, we have some of the sons of Korah listed as still there. Also, if you look in Psalm 44, I think, it is mentioned that it is a psalm, the choir of the sons of Korah. So, it appears to me that not all his family went along with what he was doing. Now, we have in verse 29 and 30, we'll just quickly read it. It's Moses speaking. It says, if these men die the death of all men, or if they suffer the fate of all the men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord brings about an entirely new thing, and the ground opens up its mouth and swallows them with all that is theirs, and they descend alive into Sheol, then you shall understand that these men have spurned the Lord. So he basically says, if these guys die normally, naturally, I'm not God's spokesman. But if the ground opens up and swallows them whole and kills them, then you know that they have sinned. And it says in verse 31, as he finished speaking these words, the ground opens up and swallows them. All of them, their tents, and all the family that was with them. And then we're also told that fire comes down and kills the 250 men of these leaders that were with them and kills them. And so that is the story of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. But it doesn't quite end there. So, well, I'm still on that page. So the next day, we're told that the congregation is going to complain against them. In verse 41, it says, and the next day all the congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, saying, you are the ones who have caused the death of the Lord's people. So after all of this, after they've been challenged with leadership, again, the people complain and say, you have caused God's people to die. And at this point, we find out that God again is ready to wipe them out. But unfortunately, this time, he really starts it. He goes ahead and starts what he's going to do. In the story, we have them basically, as they're getting accused, they look over to the tabernacle, and the cloud, which is usually above the tabernacle, has descended. And so they go and they kind of talk with God, and Moses realizes that there is a plague that has started. And this plague, Moses tells Aaron, he says, go get a fire pan and get incense and run and stop this plague, for the plague's already started. So in my understanding, God has already started. He has decided, I'm going to wipe them out, and I'm starting it. And so Moses tells Aaron to go do this. In verse 48, we're told that Aaron, he says, he took his stand between the dead and the living, so the plague was checked. So he stands, he runs between where you can see that plague is, and he stops it right there. And it says that 14,700 people died in this plague. That does not include those that died of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, and the 250. So a very large amount of people die over these grumblings against God's leaders. Is really, it's a very sad story of this. Do you have any comments as we transition on? So As we go into chapter 17, these stories are really connected as we kind of briefly touch on these. Why I say that is in chapter 16, really the leadership of God's chosen leaders are questioned. And they want to swap them out with somebody else, right? Again, this is going to happen in chapter 17. We're told here that there are complaints against the leadership, and God, this time, we don't really have time to go into it that much, but God is going to decide. He says, I'm going to end this, and this way, what I'm going to do is every tribe get a stick, kind of their leader, and you get their stick, their traveling stick, that type of thing, and you're going to put it in front of the testimony of the Lord. So you're going to put it there in the tabernacle. And so they leave it there overnight. And as they leave it there, there's going to be something that's going to happen that's going to declare which tribe is supposed to be, that should be the leader, right? And so Moses puts all of these rods in there. And it says in verse 8, it says, the next day Moses went into the tent of the testimony, and behold, the rod of Aaron from the house of Levi had sprouted and put forth buds and produced blossoms, and it bore ripe almonds. So, there again, God is declaring who is supposed to be in this leadership position, and it should be the end of that there. And that's really the story of chapter 17, a very short chapter. In chapter 18 and 19, we have again kind of the duties of the priest and the Levites. We're also told how the Levites and the priest are going to get their portions. Remember that they are not going to have land in Israel. They're not going to. So they're going to need to be supported in some way. And here we're instructed on how. There mentions tithing and that they're going to get a portion of that. Not going to have time to go into that, but chapter 18 and 19 are more a law. We've had chapters really 15, 16, 17 were more history. Again, we have more law. In chapter 19, we have this ordinance of a red heifer. Some people will take this instructions here. I think it's talking about, it has to do with sins and being cleansed and things like that. And some people will take that and will see the instructions and will say, well, that is very similar to making soap or something like that. It's very possible that it is. But it doesn't say that. We just know that this is what God had instructed his people on how to be cleansed. And so always take that type of thing with a grain of salt. Just know that this is what God had instructed his people to do. Okay, let's get into chapter 20. I want to encourage you too that we're flying through this stuff. We're flying through it. I mean, there's so much. And you really are not getting a whole lot of really detailed information about this. It's just part of how this curriculum works. And it's designed in the hope that you will read this and get a much further information about what God has declared to his people. And so I would really encourage you to read this for yourself, and so you will know much more detail than anything that I can ever describe to you in this class. I really, really would encourage you to do that. It's unfortunate that it's that way, but it's that way on purpose. Our purpose is to get the general idea of these stories as we move through the Old Testament and the New Testament and learning how it all fits together. Okay, in chapter 20 we have multiple stories that we're going to look at. The first one, Miriam is going to die. It says in verse 1, remember Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron, it says, the sons of Israel, the whole congregation, came to the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed at Kadesh. Now Miriam died there and was buried there. Okay, so it says in the first month, we can kind of figure out, well, the first month of what? By what happens later on in chapter 20. It's the first month of the 40th year. So they are that close to the land of Canaan. And Miriam is going to die. The next thing we're going to look at in chapter 20 is the waters of Meribah. Again, I think we start in verse 2, that we find out that there's no water in this area. And that the people are going to cry out against Moses and Aaron because of this, because they have no water. Do you remember another time that this happens? Back in Exodus 17, this exact thing happens, right? And so we have this story as we go on, and God is going to instruct them on a way to get water. But I want you to look in verse 10. It says, Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly before the rock. And he said to them, listen now, you rebels, shall we bring forth water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted up his hands, and he struck the rock twice with his rod. And the water came forth abundantly, and the congregation and their beasts drank. So water comes forth, and it's supplied. But there's a problem here. In verse 8, it says that God speaks to Moses and says, take the rod, and you and your brother Aaron assemble the congregation and speak to the rock before their eyes. Speak to the rock. But, as we just saw in verse 10, he hits the rock twice, and water comes forth. So, because of this, Moses and Aaron are going to be punished, and their punishment is going to be that they are not allowed to go into the land of Canaan. That's going to be their punishment. And when I first think about that, I think, man, that is really tough. Moses has been the leader of the congregation of Israel. He has done so much for them. He's brought them out of Egypt. He's brought them to Mount Sinai. He's been the mediator between God and them. And then he slips up this one time. He was so close to being able to go into the land of Canaan. And if it was not for the people, the children of Israel, he would have been able to go. Remember at Kadesh Barnea, if they had said, all right, we can take it, they would have gone right into the land. And so when I first think about that, it is tough. It's tough that Moses doesn't get to go. And I think we can kind of say, well, that is unfair. That's unfair that he slips up one time and his punishment is he is not allowed to go into the land that he has longed to go into. But as we look through the rest of this, and it doesn't say it here, if you look over in Deuteronomy 3, it's mentioned again. But I don't see a time that Moses comes to God and says, God, that's unfair. That's unfair. Why would you let that happen? I've been so faithful to you, and I slipped up this one time, and you're going to not allow me to go into the promised land? In Deuteronomy 3, we're told that he pleads with God to reconsider this. And God says, he says, don't speak to me again on this matter. And he does not speak to God again on this, and that's it. And so I just find that interesting. I find it, I'm sure Moses obviously was devastated about it, but what did he do? He accepted God's punishment, and he was forgiven for it. We know that obviously he was forgiven for his sin. You think about he's one of the two men at the when Jesus is transfigured, that he's one of the two guys there with him. So we know that he was clearly in heaven with God, that he was in paradise there. Yes, that.
I mean, that was the reason.
Right, and you kind of see it in the text that they say, must we do this and stuff, and so Right. That is the reason why. That is that he did not hallow them. He did not do what he was supposed to do in honoring God in that way. So as we continue on in chapter 20, we have this story that Edom denies Israel permission to pass through its land. And then we also have the story of Aaron dying on Mount Hor. And here Eleazar and Moses and Aaron go up to the mountain. And Eleazar is going to put on the high priest garments. And then from there, Aaron will die and Israel will mourn for 40 years. We see in that picture there of the traditional spot of Mount Hor. It's near Petra, Jordan. Today, it's kind of similar, I think, to how it's kind of all in a generic area. They all kind of look the same. It's not just like one peak and okay, that's it. That's the mountain. I kind of think about that with maybe I guess you could call it hills. We call it mountains over in Huntsville, Montesano Mountain. If you look at that though, there's Montesano, there's Green Mountain, but they're all kind of all the same area. It's all right beside each other. There's no distinguishing marker. And I think that's the same way. It's in a general area here in Jordan, that Mount Hor is where Aaron dies. You have any comments? Brent?
Thinking back to the previous event and a passage in Psalm 106, 32 and 33, the psalmist notes that event, the waters of Meribah, provoked Moses' spirit. It says that it didn't go well with him, and he spoke unadvisedly with his lips.
Yeah, that's...
People provoked him. And so, but to tag it along with what Mr. Richter said, the things that we do, things that we say, even though we may not proclaim that I don't believe God, I don't respect Him, but the things that we do and the things that we say can reflect a lack of faith and honor to God.
That's a great point. Steve, did you?
Yeah. In the stories that we've looked at today, the thread that runs through them all is the complaining of the multitude. And it's kind of disheartening when you realize that they've come through the 40 years now, and the people that had complained before had all died, and you have a whole new generation of complainers. And it's the whole congregation. Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, kind of everybody gets caught up in that, and then the whole congregation complains about how that was settled, and then the whole congregation complains about not having water. And what happens is when the congregation keeps complaining and complaining and complaining, then the leaders get extraordinarily frustrated. And Moses was provoked. And it's a bad situation all the way around. And there's some applications I think we should bring over to today about, let's be careful about complaining against the leadership of the church, the leadership that God provided, and then let's not provoke our leaders.
Yeah. And I think y'all all kind of touched on this. After that, he is provoked, but it's still his fault that he did that, right? He is provoked by the children of Israel, but he still was wrong, and he still is punished for being wrong, even though that he was provoked in that way. Great comments. So we're going to look at one last story here in chapter 21 as we go through it. It's the story of the bronze serpent. It says in verse 6 that the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people so that many of the people had died. And so they complained this time about a lack of food, is what we're told, I think, in verse 5. And so God sends these fiery serpents to the people, and they bite them, and they're killing, and they're dying. And so they cry out to Moses, and God instructs Moses to make a fiery serpent. It says, the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent and set it on a standard, a pole. And it shall come about that everyone who is bitten, when he looks at it, he will live. And so Moses made a bronze serpent and set it on a standard. And it came about that if a serpent bit any man, that if he looked to the bronze serpent, he lived. Okay, so we have this story here about that. I think the bell should ring any moment. here again, we have them complaining about this time a lack of food and water, and he sends these fiery serpents. One of the things I have noticed about this, I think this is a really good example of how that as it kind of relates to baptism. And what I mean by that is the fact that God tells people to make, you have to go look at this statue. You're going to have to go do that. In the same way, we are told that you have to be baptized to be saved, right? And so some people, I think, would argue that, no, you can't do that because that would be a work of man, and that because of that, baptism is not necessary because you would be, it'd be a work of you. You could make that same argument here, right? I guess if you're trying to say that, it's a very similar situation. God tells the people to go and look upon, he commands them, if you want to be saved, you want to not die, you're going to go look at that thing. So that requires them to stand up or get out of their tent and go to wherever this bronze serpent was and look at it. And so I think about that, and I think that that is a very good correlation in understanding how baptism works, that it is not a work of man. Here, again, they did not earn their salvation in any way or earn their healing in any way, even though they had to get up and walk to it. But it was God that provided that because it was a commandment of God to do, just as baptism is today. I know I kind of flew through that, but that's, I hope you dwell on that and think about that some. Sarah, comment?
So we'll go back to the story of Aaron's rod, some sort of staff that those men, I guess, carried. And in a process that generally takes months, maybe years, that rod sprouted and budded and produced almonds overnight. God had the power to do that, make something happen in a short period of time, short few hours that normally takes maybe years. God also had the power to create the world in 6 days. People question that, but God was able to create a fully functioning world in a period of 6 days because he had that power to do. And even though it's on a much smaller scale, I couldn't help but think of that when I heard, when you think about that story, something that normally takes a long time, happening in a few hours.
Yeah. That's a good thought of understanding. You think about God's power in he's able to produce almonds on something that's clearly miraculous in just a couple of hours, as he was able to do on a much larger scale with creating the world in 6 days. So, any other comments?
I was on this bronze serpent in Huston, later to be called, that's where we get a modern medical symbol from.
Yeah, it sure is.
And another thing is, later on it become to be worshipped.
Yeah.
And it had to be destroyed because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the Church of Christ, you don't see a crucifix or a cross a lot in the church because of the problem with the bronze serpent, that this symbol became
Yeah,
something that worshiped.
that they're worshiping, right?
Likewise, the crucifix or the cross actually gets worshipped by some religions. We need to be careful about that.
That's a good point. Good point. Anything else? Okay, thank you, everybody.